Hello, everybody. How are you all doing? My name is Neil with PortalToAscension. Welcome back to the portal, and excited for today to be going live with someone that I really admire and also just love to have conversations with. Because if you've tuned into any of our past conversations on PortalToAscension, we dive very deep, and I love topics and individuals where we can connect so many dots together and share insight and wisdom and really bring the pieces together of what is going on in the universe. Who are we? Where we come from? What's been happening on this planet? And so today, even though we've planned this out, truly don't know where the conversation is going to go. We have Tim Tactics coming on in a second, and the presentation, well, today's stream is called 70 Years of Unacknowledged Extraterrestrial Contacts. And that's because that's the umbrella of really, Tim's background and his awareness of these unacknowledged contacts and his role in the disclosure process now, but what he was doing as he was a part of the programs in which he was interacting with, in communication with different beings from the cosmos and other dimensions. So we're going to get into that in a second, but I want to let you know that Tim is actually going to be at our conference in Glastonbury. So before we start and officially do the introduction, I'm going to go ahead and share a trailer. Hello to everybody tuning in. Hello, Kieran, BC. And I think we're going to get a good amount of people on today for the live. So go ahead and say hi in the chat room. Let's get some interaction going. Let's say hello. Tell us where you're from. And actually, what would be really cool is if we got some live questions from you guys. And you will save me some work, even though I think I can probably come up with some. But go ahead and leave some questions in there, and we'll speak about those and touch on those if we get an opportunity to. So Tim, I connected with Tim a year ago. We did a webinar, which was named after the same title as this stream here. And we've done a few interviews. And now Tim is coming to his first ever live conference, which I feel extremely honored to be the organization that is bringing someone like Tim out to the first time doing an event like this. And it's a special one because it's actually in Glastonbury, England. And you need to look at the other past shows really to know why that's so important. But this event is a 3-day conference, September 27th to 29th. But you can come for 6 days and have a whole 6-day experience. You can go on a tour with us on the Thursday. You can come for the 3 days of the conference. You can stay for the post-conference workshops, in which Tim is actually doing a post-conference workshop as well. And you can go on a Stone Circle Store of Avery. So it's like seriously a megalithic experience. And you can either come for the live conference, attend in person, AscensionGlastonbury.com, or you can go ahead and sign up for the live stream. So I'm going to play the trailer here, show you the website, and then we'll bring Tim on. So let's do this. So tune in, check out the website, AscensionGlastonbury.com. Hope to see some of you guys there. It's going to be an incredible experience. And here's the website, AscensionGlastonbury.com. You can see, I'm going to do a whole separate video just going over the sacredness of this area, but you can see the dates there. Here's some of the speakers. We got Laura Eisenhower, Tim Tactics, Magenta Pixie, Adam Apollo, Oliver Huntley, Maria Wheatley, Debbie Dashinger. And then Tim is also doing a post-conference workshop. So not only you can sign up for the event, you can, on sign up, you can get the package where you get the post-conference workshop, or you can sign up for the post-conference workshop separately by going down here and selecting that option, or on his profile right there. So hope to see you guys there. So let's bring Tim on, shall we? Tim is a governance expert from Europe. For almost a decade, he has worked as a tactical advisor within the covert governance sector in Europe, which aims, among other things, to understand the missions and strategies of non human intelligences on our planet and beyond. He has had face to face sightings with so called exotic life forms, beings not from this earth. Tim also reports numerous experiences with advanced technologies behind closed doors and shares insider knowledge from 10 years of work in undisclosed projects, especially on the topic of the current disclosure. His deep understanding of the mysteries of the universe comes from extensive contact. So, everybody, let's give a big Portal to Ascension welcome to Tim. How you doing, brother?
Oh my
Welcome.
goodness. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Neil. Hi, everyone in the community. Thanks for tuning in. And what a nice trailer. Oh my goodness. I especially love the artworks. Hope they're gonna, something like that's gonna show up too.
Oh,
Super
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
going to be
Yeah.
great. So, brother, I think what I want to, because as I was reading your bio, I realized that I've been saying that you're part of a program from Germany, but in your bio it says a governance expert from Europe. So could you speak exactly on what the background is, and is it like a secret space program that extends the whole of Europe, or is it a specific countries program?
Well, no. Well, let's put it that way. There is like a strong collaboration between European countries and certain other Western allies. So that is the reason why I put European. And obviously, while the US and certain other countries have their own insiders, I'm currently the only one who stands who reports on stuff that happened in Europe. So that's the reason. So it's more than just one singular country that is involved with that. However, which is very, very true that the bigger countries, UK, France, Germany for sure, Russia, China, USA, they all got their own stocks in the space program, and also looking into what's happening on the other side of this reality and outside of the planet as well.
Right. Somebody told me years ago, I forget who it was now, but it was something that said they said to me, the only thing that Russia and the US can agree upon is not disclosing the truth about the extraterrestrial presence. And so I'm curious, like, are there specific alliances that you were part of that were allied, and are they other independent countries and organizations that are completely doing something on their own but are actually kind of at odds with the other countries?
There's a strong splitting in history, and I think we dive right into the topic of today's talk, Neil, which is 70 years of unacknowledged UFO context or ET context. And if you directly look into humanity, you will see that you will find a lot of evidence that humans have had contact with other species, other reality forms, other forms of life for thousands and thousands of years. However, in modern history, it all goes back to, unfortunately, World War II. So that's when the splitting began. Then we have 1947, which is the famous Roswell crash, Corona, New Mexico, which probably wasn't even a crash because it was more like, sprinkling in the spacecraft so that the US actually has access to these these technologies as well. I say as well because Germany at that time was one of the first countries who started that, and that is the moment where you got all these so-called breakaway civilizations or societal parts, which actually means whenever a human group tapped into the knowledge of there are ETs, there is technology out there. There is even technology buried on this planet, that survived thousands of years and still, lies somewhere in underneath soil or rocks or whatever. Whenever that happens, usually these groups have tried to keep the stuff in their hands. So you have a traditional, like a historical line where all these groups really divided and detached from the norm stream reality world. And since since 2019, yeah, a little earlier, but something around the 2015, 17, around that time. The US Navy has actually initiated a contact to bring all these different lines that you now have and merge them and bring them back together. And yeah, that is one of the major cause why we do have disclosure right now, and it's taken place simultaneously, even in very, very similar events around the world. You will see, I know you're in Asia right now, so you will see that, for example, in Asia, there are certain incidents that exactly match what happened in the US with these balloons. Russia, even though they are like completely, the media in Russia is completely detached from what you might even perceive, because all these websites are blocked and so on. But they have their own disclosure topic, and the Western world too, and other worlds too.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is a worldwide phenomena, and so many different countries have connected with them. And I know Japan has their own program going on and their own contact. And in World War II, with the Japanese in there as well, they were having a lot of sightings, right? But it's so interesting that you said the groups detached from the mainstream world. And that's really important. We were conventionally going forward, and all of a sudden there was some sort of interference with technologies, advanced craft, crash retrievals, and Tim Burchett, actually, to second your point, Congress member Tim Burchett, when he was on a podcast, they said to him, where are these crashes being found? And one of the places was archaeological digs, okay, ancient archaeological digs, some of these crashes. So so can go into that a little more then. There was a breakaway, and was this a global thing that happened? And now all these different countries have their own programs. Was this around World War II? And then what is the process of bringing it back together? What are we doing right now to bring it back together? Is it just disclosing this information so the public's aware?
No, I mean, why would they? That'd be like, why change a running system that was kind of successful for 70 years? Because apparently, and I'm lots of people who question that, and now we have a different discussion. If you go to, if you look at Joe Rogan and all these podcasts, they now handle the subject differently. But if you go back, then the first question that people would have had is like, hey, how could anybody just hide that big of a topic that easily? So it was well established. The US did more than any other nation in 1947. The CIA was founded directly after the crash in Roswell. So if people ask why is there even a CIA? Before that, it was distributed to all these military branches. They had their own intelligence sectors, which traditionally makes a lot of sense. So basically, they had this crash in 1947, which started lots and lots of this awareness about what's happening. And again, we very much speculate and have reasons to believe that it's not even a real crash. It's more like, here you go, there is evidence. We do know that when you find that Roswell crash thing, it's going to start something. It's going to start a whole development, including the internet. You and I wouldn't be talking if certain technologies wouldn't have been found at that time. So the CIA was founded directly after that infamous crash, because the US was completely overwhelmed in that very moment. They were like, oh my goodness, we need an agency to take care of that and to actually look into that. It was 2 years after World War II was ending. You probably, definitely about Operation High Jump, which was the US Army then figuring out that something in Antarctica was going on. I just read that and I had a good laugh, and probably you will have a good laugh too, Neil, because about like less than 1 month ago in Germany, one of the headlines was breaking news. German scientists figured out Antarctica once was not the icy place that it now is. So that is takes kind of a long time to because apparently in the 1920s, the Germans already figured out that Antarctica once was a Mediterranean place, so it was inhabited at one time. And some of the excavations they had, some of the the scientific experiments and so on, expeditions, these were designed in order to look into that. Traditionally or historically, they were hoping to find something like Atlantis, something to where they could connect with this other civilization that might have been on this planet. And very likely, I mean, nowadays we do know that there were instances and iterations of civilizations on this planet before humanity developed after the last few thousands of years. So definitely there's like a strong historical background to this, and again that developed in such a way that the operational groups themselves figured out that they had an advantage looking into that technology, looking into the understanding of how the universe works. That is also something that I want to bring to the table when we talk about Glastonbury, because there is a strong effect on your life when it's not like a fun fact. I mean, it's kind of fun to know that there are other species and there are other worlds, and the universe. We are not alone. Never been, never will be in the universe. The universe is teaming up with life forms everywhere. But there's a practical advantage to your consciousness. There's a practical advantage to our consciousness. There's a practical advantage to the way we perceive and handle the world and reality when we dive into the learnings. So to answer your question, these groups were actually very much interested in the technology. They were very much interested in keeping the stuff for themselves, which sparked a lot of the issues. Lots of the version that we have in the US between these different agencies. So if you looked into that, the CIA was not like seen as a supporting agency. They were seen as a threat by other military branches. The Air Force was not trusting the Navy, and the Navy was not trusting the Army, and so on and so on. So that is how it developed. We famously have, I think it was Eisenhower, which is kind of an interesting take, because Laura Eisenhower is going to be at the conference too. I think it was him, but not 100% sure because European here. But I think he said, please be aware of all these other groups that have their own Navy, their own Air Force. I see you not. So, okay. Which is super interesting. I actually am curious to know what Laura Eisenhower knows about that, because she's granddaughter.
Right, a great granddaughter. And actually, yesterday I have a pre-record. I did a 2-hour interview with Laura, pre-recorded in 3 segments, and the last one is all about Eisenhower and what happened. So I'll send that to you if you want to look at it. But
I love to.
Yeah,
I love to.
It's very interesting.
That's because that's an interesting take, and you got to keep that in mind. I mean, the strong stance that this guy was taking to go out into the public and even hint that there is something going on that should tell people a lot, and that is that is actually the history. And even though it wasn't that extreme in different other countries, Germany or Russia, UK, and so on, they are much more. They have a much more cohesive form of dealing with the subject, and also they're not that compartmentalized. Because something that the US is very much doing is bringing all the knowledge in different, like the same stuff that they did with the nuclear bomb. They would take a subject and then divide it into hundreds of thousands of people and different departments, different agencies, and then at the end they try to reassemble everything.
So interesting.
It
So
is interesting, absolutely interesting.
people didn't know what they're working on. They were just doing their little component, right? Only
It's
certain people need the
crazy
master
up
plan.
to today. So if you have people that work on certain parts, they technological parts, they have no idea.
Right.
These.
And that's what I've heard with some whistleblower testimony about the crash retrievals and the technology that they're getting. That people, not everybody is even aware what they're truly working on or where this technology comes from. And so you're saying that they, that the Air Force, the Navy, they were butting heads basically, and they had their own programs. And even Michael Salla speaks about this and some others, and they have code names for different programs. And one story Michael Salla gave was that the Navy already was working with a specific ET race, U.S. Navy, and they had the technology to actually have fleets around the outer side of our solar system. And then the Air Force had some other technology from another race, and then eventually the Air Force had technology in the UFO to go to the solar system at the outer skirts, and they found a Navy craft in the outer skirts of the solar system, and they had no idea that the Navy had the technology to even go there.
I've never heard that story, but that is so interesting, and very likely it could be. It could very much be.
Yeah.
Because
So you think
that's a
it's coming
fascinating
together now?
story.
You think it's the same thing going on now still, that is all compartmentalized, Air Force and all that? Because I think you're saying that it's coming together.
Yeah, it's initiative. It's an initiative by the Navy. They tried in, I think it was like 2015 or something, maybe earlier, something like that. They really brought a lot of these active players to the table, because what then happened after the Germans, who looked into the UFO phenomenon very 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 early on, the Italians as well. I think some
Yeah.
of some of the what's his name again, the
Mussolini?
whistleblower.
Oh, David Grush.
Thank you so much, Grush. Yeah, so he basically released some files where he said like, hey, the Italians had a crash site as well. So yeah, the US definitely tried to bring these groups together, and it happened even on a corporal level, because some of these corporations, again being given some of the ET technology, looked into that, and they figured out like, oh my goodness, that is like something that we should actually try to trade or like look into and develop ourselves. So there are some companies on this planet who we might call as advanced companies. They do have knowledge, they do know what's going on in the universe, and they do hold certain parts of technology, maybe not to the same extent as certain militaries on this planet who have a bigger budget, but some companies have their own small armies as well, which is kind of crazy. So apparently you have like uh, almost like 100 different groups on this planet, bigger groups, that have technology to go off planet, that have maybe even military technology, that have extreme knowledge about what's happening, and an understanding of the quantum universe, and including ET species. And at one point, that was classified as a risk factor. And it would have been just better to bring all these players together in order to create a cohesive, political structure around Earth. And that is going on. That is one of the reasons why we do have a global phenomenon.
And are you talking specifically about the U.S. bringing it together? Is the rest of the world still compartmentalized, or is there some sort of general cabal or some sort of entity that's bringing all the programs together, or does Russia still have their own thing going on? Because I know China. I don't know if you ever looked into the China secret space program, but we did a 3-hour webinar just on China's secret space program, and they have their own trajectory coming out of it. So, and obviously on the mainstream, there's this like political war against these countries, Russia, China, the US. So is there something beyond that that's bringing them all together, or is the unity just within the US?
No, it's an international attempt or effort to bring all these people together, because we're dealing with I would say 100 different groups, and that includes different nations. We do know the big nations on this planet, they all have their own space forces. Nowadays, we have official space forces. The US, very famously, Donald Trump was the one who was made to announce that the US now has a space force. UK, Russia, Germany, it's almost secretive, but if you really Google it, you're gonna find that all of them, France, for example, too, they all got their own space forces right now too, which is one of the reasons. One of the reasons why they have that is to make the recruitment much easier. Because in my time back then, it took 4 years to get me accredited, and I didn't even know I was even in the in the application at all.
Wow. So they're working together, and so it makes sense to what's going on right now, because it seems to be a war between those that have brought it all together and those that are politicians but they weren't aware that this was even happening, and they thought they had top secret clearance as a Congress member, and then all of a sudden the egos get kind of checked because they're like, wait a second, there's something beyond what I know, right? And it seems like they're fighting to get this information out and more public.
Yeah, it's a fascinating take, because apparently the Navy tries to bring these groups together. However, something that politics, especially exopolitics, but also politics inside of planet Earth, it's not always that cohesive and easy to navigate as it might sound, because all these groups have different agendas. They all have different departments where maybe one head might look into the subject differently than the other one. So something that is happening in with these secret space forces is that they all agreed upon, hey, we need to bring that topic forward. The reason for that is, by the way, a very cyclical phase that the planet is going through. So we are going through a very significant phase, that makes that all possible. But on a national level, you might have different actors, you might have different protagonists, you have different power players. And I do remember one speech by Putin, who was back then, it was just about the right after the war started, but he still said, we still are going to, and I had that very clearly on my mind when I was watching that interview. He was saying we are still going to continue our collective elaboration, or like work together with these other. You remember that, right? So it was crazy, because on a national level, these groups were fighting and killing each other. But on another on a side note, he's also saying, hey, we're still game with disclosure.
Isn't that crazy, man? Like the illusion of what's going on and the wars and everything. Just like how the same bankers funded both sides of the war in World War II.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, for sure. This is like how complex these things are, and it's often portrayed as if there's like one major force that is doing all of it, or that everything that carries the same insignia or the same flag is the same political agenda. No, it is not. If you think about that, you might have a hierarchy, seemingly a hierarchy, but reality, you have agendas over agendas within agendas. So it's crazily complex at times. Yeah.
Right. Just like the ETs, they got all types of agendas for Earth. And I would assume is coming out with David Grush and other people that aren't coming out in Congress, but Grush is relaying information to Congress about, is that it seems that many different governments around the world are in connection with different types of ET races, right? Not all the same, but there's various races that are in communication with specific governing entities. So not only are they communicating with different ETs and probably hearing different stories about our role in the universe, the cosmos, but they're also all retrieving different types of UFOs, right? So even though they have some sort of agreement to like join together in their efforts, there is also the intentions are different because they're communicating with different ETs, and this is something you probably know more about because you're connecting with these beings as well, and that they're working on different crafts. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think, like, for me, it's first of all, it's right. What you absolutely true. What you're saying. We do know that there are different ET species that have, that resonate and connect with other, different parts of different nations and different historical times too. People in South America have a different history with UFO species and ET species compared to Egypt or to Germany and so on. But the technology itself, there aren't too many ways to construct and to utilize certain physical, rules and laws in the universe. It's if a nation once has discovered what actually is needed to create, for example, an electromagnetic field, an electrogravitical gravitic field, then it's almost, cars around the world, they all drive, they all have the same mechanics behind their facade. However, they might look very distinctively different. So for me, and I've never been in the military. I've always been in, the more diplomatic approach, governance, actually. So for me, something that is very significant is how different the worldview and the attitude and the learnings and teachings of these different species can be. And that very much indicates and very much influences, how these nations are being brought to the point where we are currently.
Did you ever have a conversation with any of these ETs that you had face-to-face sightings with?
Yeah, very much. I do, because at that time we did have mainly two different experiments, where the government or the secret governance sector was looking into the contact and looking into the fact that we are surrounded by ET species, and I was assigned to what was called exotic life forms. So we were looking into the grays as one species, which is crazily widespread. We think that about 30 million US Americans, 30, that's 3 and 7 zeros, people in the US alone who have seen traces or have had, glimpses of a UFO or something that is directly related to the gray species, which is called, they're called grays because they have gray skin. However, they also have different other skin tones depending on where they send their these little bodies. But that is one of the species that has reached pop cultural acknowledgement. We were contacting or being in contact and doing research on them. And another species, which was at that time was called an experimental life form. It was looking into an experiment that the Germans started very, very early on, more than 70 years ago. And we finalized that in my time, which is looking into a higher frequential life form. So a life form that is at level 6 consciousness, which is basically the flip side of this reality and consciousness that we are experiencing here. And something that I found super interesting is both of these species extremely experienced, to an extreme degree that is almost above humans' heads, definitely. However, they have different documentations of the history of the planet, so that is already something that might be interesting. Because why is that? Because some in a solar-based universe, when you observe something that is light can travel in different ways. So someone who, for example, observes something from a different standpoint, light might travel in a different direction and it might look different. so people might have a different glimpse of reality, and that is the underlying
Whoa,
physics.
very
Try
interesting.
to narrow that down in 20 seconds.
No, I get it though. It's right up my alley. I understand. So, okay, that's a great segue into a deeper conversation, believe it or not. But I'd love for so this seems like something that I've been theorizing about is when you look at ancient civilizations, because as you know, I'm really into looking at the ancient past. And when you look at the extraterrestrial stories, there's a story of many seedings of humanity. I just did a Palladian conference, 8 hours last weekend just on Palladians. And we had seven speakers. We went into different things. We showed the universe. We showed every story around the world for Pleiades. We had Palladian channelings. And it seems in some stories from the Palladians that there were seven different seedings of Earth, each connected to a different star, right? And then you have the stories of the Lyrans and the Syrians seeding Earth. Then you have the story of the Anunnaki seeding Earth. And if you try to piece together the timelines, in which I try to do in 20 years, you have a lot of overlapping stories that how could this one happen at this time, right? And so my theory is that what's happening now and why the population is increasing too is that many of us come from different parallel realities and we're all coming into this reality now. So a lot of us, like in my history, 300,000 years ago, my people, my linear timeline were genetically altered by the Anunnaki. But for you, maybe it was something completely different. You know what I
I've
mean?
never heard about the Anunnaki. Isn't that crazy? Because that is like one of the first questions that I've been asked once I came
Yeah.
forward. And I want to make that clear. Outside of these programs, I never was into
Yeah.
ufology. And I think people, assume that because I'm always getting these questions about books that I've never read, so I can't comment on them. But apparently, yes, that's true. Like there are different. There is something very interesting to how light works, how time works, how timelines works, timeline work, and how they are compressed too. So the infamous Mandela effect. There is also reasons for that because the universe keeps merging together timelines that to make like stabilized timeline so that we can perceive them. And something that is super, super important, and I think everyone, right, by the way, hi everyone, I just looked into YouTube and I saw so many comments. I'm so cool, happy about that. Super cool. So something that people should really keep in mind, and one of the reasons why engaging right now, for example, going to Glastonbury is so important at this very moment, more than ever, is because the planet is going through a certain cyclical time. So just imagine everything that happens on the planet, you will find that everywhere. We do have cycles. We do have day, we do have night, we do have certain times, seasons of the year, summer, winter, autumn, and so on and so on. I think the US calls it fall, but you know what I mean. So there are cycles. There is, on a much larger scale, the planet is, for example, going through the sun, around the sun, right? But the sun itself is also traveling, because a lot of people might think, okay, the sun is like an entity that is fixed in the star system. No, it's traveling with hundreds of thousands of miles per hour through around a much bigger central entity, spiraling actually, and that makes up for makes certain cyclical phases, like almost seasons in the solar system, that happen. And if you think about 15,000 years ago, we had another one of these moments which we are living through right now on this planet. This is a phase where the Bible was calling that the apocalypse, which actually only means releasing the veil, or like seeing the truth through that. And where we are heading right now, there is much more information on a smaller space than ever, which means much more information at that point in that area in the universe means there is more worlds, there is more consciousness, there is more activity. All of that is right now streaming into the planet, which is why you always see on the television, like, hey, the sun activities are going to increase. Or maybe you've heard that the Earth core stopped and rotates in a different direction, which happened 15,000 years ago, which is a natural thing. Back then, if you think about a glass with water, that's some of the examples I always give. If you steer it up in one direction and then you stop and then you go the other one, you're going to spill water everywhere. That is what happened 15,000 years ago with this infamous flood that is mentioned everywhere, not only in the Bible, but in African texts, in Chinese texts, South America, Japan, everywhere they talk about that. They have this information. So people at home, community, everyone, right now, one of the reasons why you are on this planet and why I not only encourage you, but also ask you dearly to engage with is right now we are going through this phase again. And it's more important than ever that every one of us who might be open-minded enough and who have prepared ourselves to a certain degree about these new realities, we are here to balance that field. We are inside of this Earth reality field in order to balance it, because as we are speaking here, and I'm very glad we can have that discussion. There are hundreds of millions of people who have not a faint of an idea, who have no idea about what's happening. And these people we are protecting just by being here and just by holding a space that everything will turn out very, very well.
Yes, and which is why they call people like us the way showers. It's just that we're basically coming out with this information that not that many people on the planet, lots of people know, millions of people, but there's definitely billions that aren't in the consciously aware of this, right? And so it's just the beginning phases. I really like what you're sharing about the cycles, because it seems like we're cycles within cycles within cycles. Like our solar system has the precession of the equinoxes, and that's one cycle just for our solar system. But then we have the galactic cycle, and then we're also going around the central sun, which is known as the black hole, and then the Milky Way galaxy is going through around a central point within the universe. And then the question is the universe and just another fractal of something even greater? And how many fragmentations from source do we get? And it's like all these cycles, what's happening now is multiple cycles on that level are completing at the same time, giving us an opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, that was very well put. And it's a very, not a complicated, but it's a very complex architecture, the whole universe. Because ultimately we are not dealing with like a horizontal level of these these cycles, but we're also dealing with a much more vertical or like even paradox level of other worlds too. Something that we figured out just in order to paint the map of the universe, which is almost impossible to do that correctly because it's so fluid and so exotic in certain worlds. There are other worlds that are very, very distinctively different to what we experience here. And the only way they connect to this world right now is because they do not, which is a crazy, it's just beautiful to think about that, but it's very, very true. You can have a connection to something just by not connecting to it. That doesn't mean that it's not existing. It means it is there. It is there, and it definitely has some influences on this world as well. So there are some worlds that work within rules or have rules that do not connect to what we experience on this planet at all.
Yeah. Well, it's basically its own construct or its own matrix. And we exist within our own matrix. And our matrix system, it overlaps with specific other ones, but then it also operates independently of ones too, it seems. I would love to get now. I just want to get back to the story of the Anunnaki for a second, because I'm thinking the reason why you didn't hear about the Anunnaki is because there were no beings called the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki is a term that only means from those from heaven come to earth. It's not the name of the beings. So it was a phrase. Basically, it's almost exactly like saying someone from space. That's what it means. Okay, so and then that connects to the Elohim, because in a lot of ways, Anunnaki and Elohim are interchangeable in some level. However, the Anunnaki were groups of beings that came at a specific time together, and the Elohim seemed to be a blanket statement even bigger for beings that all came from space over tens of thousands of years. Some of them not even on the same level or even working with the other one. Some of them didn't even know the other beings came to our planet. So
Yeah.
when you start looking at it like that, maybe that could be a reason why no ET ever said anything about the Anunnaki. But was there any information that came across to you about genetic manipulation of the human genome? Is that something that you came across?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
Tell me.
for sure. That's a big topic. Because ultimately, um, well, first of all, something that thank you, by the way, for letting me in on that Anunnaki topic, because it comes up sometimes, and it's kind of interesting. And we've also seen that several of these ET species that were interacting with the very early human society on this planet thousands of years ago, they all have, some of them didn't even know that there were other players too. Some of them were interacting with humans and were not aware that there might have been other ET species that are also doing something on the planet. So we do have different, what we call, sample groups on the planet, which might explain why there is a certain diversity in the appearances and looks of humans as well as the genetic code. There are certain specifications inside of that too. So we were talking about, these advanced programs are talking about sample groups that have been sprinkled upon Earth, some of which genetically have been altered massively by other species, some of which have been proxies for other species as well. So we do know that because you can, for example, increase the dial on something like the aggression rate of a species. You can make a very nice pet dog with some genetic changes. You can turn that into a very aggressive wolf again, or like at least something like that. So if you think about the history of imperialism on this planet, we do have some species, or let's say some sample groups of humans on the planet who are very in harmony, or used to be very much in harmony with the nature, with the way they treated the land, and so on and so on. And then we do have some sample groups of apparently the same species, but they are very, very aggressive and even went into different parts of the world, disturbing the evolution of certain other sample groups as well. So we, at least, and I was talking to some colleagues from the US, I was aware of 15 different or like major manipulating species. The people, like colleagues in the US, they were talking about, I think, 27 or something, and that does not even include hundreds of species that have done minor changes. And then you can think about the genome as being something that you can very easily change yourself through the right and proper techniques with your mind, because DNA, genetics, these things very much react towards your thoughts and to your psychic potential and so on. So you yourself, you are changing your genome, or the way that your genetics are structured, probably every year in certain ways. You change your complete setup of particles and atoms in under 1 year too. So in 1 year from now, your bodies might seem the same, but they are not. Apparently they're not. So that is something that we definitely should take into consideration. Massive changes of genetics.
Yeah, very good point. And I just want to take a pause here really quick, because a lot of people joined us since we started. And so, well, definitely, as you guys know, I'm talking here with Tim. We're going deep here. But Tim is also going to be at our conference in Glastonbury. So ascensionglastonbury.com. September 27th to 29th. In a couple of months, we're going to be in Glastonbury for our second annual event. And that's in all the way in the west of England, in a beautiful place. It's the most metaphysical place, I would say, maybe in Europe, but definitely in England. It has a lot of ancient connections to the Druids. It was the last stronghold of the Druids when the Romans were trying to take them out. It has all these sacred sites there, and not only are we going to go to the sacred sites, going to King Arthur Abbey tour, and just a little side note here, when King Arthur died in battle, the story goes he was taken to Avalon. Avalon is Glastonbury, and there used to be a mist around Avalon. It's called the Mist of Avalon. And basically, when you go through this mist, you'd come out to an island that was surrounded by water, and it was thought to be an ancient portal, an ancient stargate into a higher dimension. And they took King Arthur there, and that is literally the central area where we're going to be. Within 1 minute of where we're going to be doing the conference is literally an abbey with King Arthur and Guinevere's tombs, right? And whether you believe the bodies are really there or it's there for ancient Christian folklore, there's just so many beautiful things there. So love to see some of you guys there. AscensionGlastonbury.com. If you cannot come in person, go ahead and check out the live stream because that's going to be fun as well.
But better come in person because I want to meet you all.
I know. Yes, and then Tim is doing a post-conference workshop as well on Monday. So,
yeah, I definitely want to see you all in that because that's going to be an interesting take. I actually, first of all, it's my very first live workshop, which is super, super cool. I'm always up for some experimental stuff with PortalToAscension. Last time we did, we talked about the in-depth history of what happened in World War II and so on. Something that I would never ever talk about in public site. Because there's just too much stuff that still needs to heal. But it's something that I found so cool and so interesting is the practical application of what it means that we're not alone in the universe, that we have this knowledge about other species, what it means that all of us carries certain fragments and certain bits and pieces, some more, some less, but we all might have certain ET strengths of DNA within us, and I can show you how to activate that. So that is very, very interesting. So the workshop that we're going to do on Monday is not only showing what happens and what happened and how disclosure and answering all your questions that you got on your mind. But I want you to dive very deeply into your connection with these other species and have practical advancements and practical advantages just from that. So that is something that I want to teach.
That's going to be fun. And then after the post-conference workshop, we have a stone circle tour. So we get to go to see some ancient stone circles. And a lot of people don't know, but the stone circles of England, a lot of people think they're Druidic, but they're actually older than the Druids. They were an ancient tribe that we don't even know who they were. So we're going to get an opportunity to go with some of the foremost experts to these sites. So it's going to be an incredible experience. Hope to see you guys there. And now I want to get back to what we're speaking about. So I just want to provide you with a couple of pieces of information that I think you might like and can kind of put into your world cosmology for genetic alteration. So in ancient scriptures, a lot of ancient scriptures, they speak about clay, humans made out of clay, right? And if you go deep into the what they're saying there, the references to clay are actually the references to genetic alteration. And it's like the metaphor for it, right? And you can go on ChatGPT and just type in every ancient civilization that spoke about clay, and then just read them yourself and just see what they're saying. It's like a laboratory experiment. It's very interesting. So now what you were saying about the aggression thing in your genes. So the Anunnaki story goes like this, okay? Do you want to jump in for a second?
That's why I love hanging out with Neil, by the way. It's always like, wow.
Well, I like hanging out with you too because we add. That's the thing. Like we add pieces to the puzzle together. We're constructing this together.
I didn't want to interrupt you. I'm curious. Let's hear.
This is a short one. So basically, in the Anunnaki scriptures, the Sumerian scriptures, when Enki and Enlil are fighting, right? And Enki is God in the Bible. Enlil is the snake. Okay, and Enki was. This is the original story. This is where the Old Testament comes from, and Enki was basically saying, we need to create these people, and we need to make sure that we've already created these people, but we don't want to give them gender. Okay, this is Garden of Eden story. And then Enlil says, no, we can't just have this androgynous man. It was androgynous man that had no sex orientated to it. We need to give it a partner, a woman, in order for them to basically be able to be happy. And then they decided that they were going to clone the new human, the new Homo hominid, out of a defeated, conquered Anunnaki that they defeated in battle, in order to have the imprint of the DNA of being conquered in the humans, so that they would be a conquered people and easily to enslave. Right? So this is the text that they literally cloned us out of the defeated Anunnaki. And in this defeated Anunnaki, they installed something called a worship gene that made us start, and that was able to be switched on or off. And when it was switched on, we worship externally to us. When it's switched off, we worship within ourselves. And they put this gene in there in order for us to basically consider them gods. And that's the story of the scriptures that the Old Testament was taken out of. Yeah, Adam and Eve story is literally that story altered.
I love that. Oh my goodness. I want to know if people find that so interesting as well, because every time you and I come together, it's like two different parts of the story, and
Yeah.
and I always have to reflect upon what we discover here together. I love that very much. But it's apparently it's true. Like there well, we have come to the conclusion that there are 95% of very socially acceptable elements of the universe. So I think we very much have to emphasize that 95 out of 100 beings everywhere, and this is statistically true even for Earth. Even if you go into the forest or everywhere, wherever you meet life, 95 out of 100 of these species, they are all, you can get along with them. They're all okay. That's they can be even friends. They can be the most beautiful partners. But however, at this level of consciousness that planet Earth is residing currently in, there might be 5% of people in your life that you meet that might be socially, you might not get along 100% with. Might be in school, might be somewhere else. It's the same truth outside of planet Earth as well. It shifts a little to the pro side the higher you go in consciousness, which is always a great thing to keep in mind. So the more you develop in consciousness, the more you realize that this is the same life form everywhere. It's not the same life form, it's the same being. We only have one universal being that all of us are. We are this one being. However, there's like countless iterations, countless forms of life. But if you look into that, there might be some species that really have put everything of their smartness into the malevolent alteration of what's going on planet Earth. The groups that I was associated with, they called it the installation. It's a German. It makes more. I think it makes more sense in German than in the English word. But it means that something is artificially set up in order to keep the evolution of humans down. And that is, that involves everyone. That even involves star seeds, like everyone, like people in our community too. They are, they have experienced this manipulation or the malevolent structure. And now it is time to remove that. So it's so important to come together. It's also so important. And I'm happy to show you some of the techniques in the workshop, how to actually free yourself from these things and have your own evolution in your hands again.
That's beautiful. So we're going to take a couple of questions from online audience right now, but I just want to ask one more first. So it's interesting you said the 5%, 95% thing, because some channels information says that there's 5% negative reptilians, and those just happen to be the ones interacting with Earth. So through any of your research or beings that you connected with, did you ever hear anything about reptilians or even see any?
Yeah. Yes, and I want to make that very clear. Reptilians is that is just like a certain genetic specification. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that these beings come from a certain genetic imprint, which is
Right.
a reptile. So people are very aware that there are some reptile species who are very hard to get along with because they have a different definition of what friendship means, and they take the the um, yeah, they also get the opposing reaction from that behavior too. So the universe is reacting upon them equivalently. But there are some reptile species that are super fascinating, and even can be a lot of joy and fun. So yeah, it's even in that uh, genetic circle you will even find, and even then you will find individuals even in certain parts of reptile species, because they all have different character traits just as much as humans have different character traits.
Yes.
So you will find lots and lots of diversity everywhere. But yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much for saying that. And so it's just like almost like saying that every human throughout a galaxy is negative. It's kind of like saying that because we're not just when we say humans, we don't just mean humans on Earth. There's human templates throughout the galaxy. So that's the same thing with reptilians. Not only is there diversity throughout the galaxy that have the genetic imprint, but then there's also like countries on Earth. These people from this country have different beliefs than this one, right? So that's
Yeah,
interesting.
I
Thank you for
mean,
sharing that.
even within one character, you can have certain humans on this planet who might be doing crazily bad stuff
Yeah.
in their professional life, or in their it's some parts in their life. On the other hand, they might be perfect friends for others. They might be
Yes.
super nice beings to hang out at different times. So it's very diverse. The universe is crazily diverse in that
Yes.
perspective.
Yes. All right. So let's take a couple questions here. We have one from Nomad Life asking, "Do you know of any other specific planets working with Earth right now?"
Oh yeah, yeah. Multiple, I think. So something that is probably the most probable species that we're gonna have open contact with, because they are very very closely related to Earth and to us all. These are the species that once inhabited this planet before this new circle, or this new cycle of inhabitants on planet Earth, meaning beings ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient South Americas, and so on. They had people. We've excavated 80 mil, not me personally, but people have excavated 80 million houses in South America at certain parts. This is huge. That's the population of Germany. One of the biggest countries in Europe. So it's absolutely crazy, and this is only what they digged out. However, they have not found many traces of the beings who lived there. Actually, everyone vanished. They have found like several, like few bodies, human bodies, that might have just landed there because they were, nomads or anything like that. So reality shows us that there was at least a cohesive, or like multiple other civilizations on this planet who vanished. Some of them went underground, some went up, so they are still in some parts still involved with what's going on planet Earth. And this is probably one of the most probably species and civilizations that might appear, because they have a lot in common, and also legally, because they were originally on this planet first. Legally, it makes sense to bring them back. They might influence what's going on planet Earth. Well, they do originally, but they might be one of the first species that we do see. We do know that there's a certain amount of other, as you said, human templates, right? So the species, and I read that in a document that I got my hands on. So it's not a direct experience. However, it comes from these advanced programs. It's humans do not originate from planet Earth, which seems to make a lot of sense to me, because when I look around, it doesn't seem that humans are very well equipped to be on planet Earth, to be honest. They carry these the clothings, and any dog seems to be more suitable to living on planet Earth. So there are templates, there are other human civilizations that come from other planets, they work together with human groups on this planet as well. And there are some other more exotic species. We do have a major frog-like species that is very involved with planet Earth. We do have some more exotic other species that are involved with Earth. So there are different species, some very accepted and seen as allies, some less accepted or loosely accepted, and some that are more seen as intruders, and they still are players.
Did you meet any of these beings? Did you meet the frog beings?
Well, I've been asked. I've been asked not by humans, but I've been asked by the Grace to meet the frog beings, but I gotta be honest. At that time, which is now like almost, I don't know how many years ago, but good couple of years ago, and at that time it was. I was fed up, to be honest, after like the 2 programs that I went through, which is it's a lot of stuff to take in quite a short amount of time, and so I declined that. Which right now I'm thinking about that differently, because I'm very, very interested in these Troctoborians, as that's the species name. Interestingly enough, when I was in the US, I met someone from the US military. And even though I've never talked about, because apparently I only was asked to meet them, but not knowing much about them, it was very, very interesting moment for me, because he started talking about the alliance that the US, for example, has with these frog beings. And in that very moment, I was like, oh my goodness, that's the same species. So and he did a call. He asked his brigadier general, and he was after doing the Gaia show, he came over to me and said like, hey, I just talked to them to my group, or my general, and we would like to get you to a US base, and we would like to get you in contact with that frog species. However, and that was the second time where I had to decline, because I did have a very, very important business meeting and I couldn't actually make it. So that is my but you know what Americans are saying, third time is a charm. So I'm still waiting for that.
All right, so here's another notch in that the frog being another confirmation for you. So are you aware of Clifford Stone?
I'm not.
Okay,
What
so
is that?
Clifford Stone, he was part of the UFO crash retrieval team for the U.S.
Oh, I
government.
think he's on Gaia too, right?
Yeah, but he passed away like 6-7 years ago. But he had some shows on there. He was interviewed, so he was a friend of ours. Stephen Greer brought him out, and Paula Harris brought him out, and he was one of the main whistleblowers for Stephen Greer. He was the only person for like 20 years talking about UFO crash retrievals. There was no other person until now David Grush. Now we have all these other people talking about it, and so I went to Roswell because he lived in Roswell, and we interviewed him at the Roswell Museum. and he was speaking about. So when I went to his house, it was like crazy. There was just classified and declassified documents everywhere, and he was like a mad scientist just with the classified documents, proving, because basically everything's released, but unless you were in the program and you know the code words, you can't search for it and find it, because you can't just type in UFO and find it on the internet in the government's websites. You need to know the codes to go to the right documents. He was in the programs. So a year before I went to his house, they had just made everything that was only available by going to the archives in DC public online. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like 10 years ago. And so then he went like a madman, started going through all these codes that he remembered and started printing out all the documentation to prove that he was in the UFO crash retrievals. I get to go to his house a couple of weeks after he's printed all this stuff out. And so we're looking at it all, and man, it's mind blowing. He had a manual as with the anatomy. It was downloaded from the government's website. The anatomy of 17 different ET species that they find most commonly at the UFO crash retrievals, in order to help them in case they're injured, right?
Oh my
And
goodness.
so this is one of the stories he has, is that a lot of times they would actually not tell you where you're going. They would basically, you weren't allowed to know where on the world this crash was, but they would send them to these crash retrievals. So one time, decades ago, he's in this like a military, like in this aircraft, and they don't know where they're going, but they're being taken off somewhere. And then they parachute, right? They parachute down, and then they find themselves in a war zone. Okay, they're in Vietnam, and it's the middle of Vietnam, and they were sent to retrieve a UFO. It crashed or left in the forests of Vietnam during the middle of the Vietnam War, and
Wow.
they didn't know where they're going. So when he gets to the UFO, they find the UFO. He starts walking around. There's a hill there. He walks around the hill. He touches it. He falls through the hill. It was a holographic mountain, and there's ETs in the mountain observing the war, and it's their UFO. And the ETs were the frog beings,
Oh
and they
no,
go,
really?
yeah, and they go, Clifford. They knew Clifford because Clifford is also like a starseed. He's been having contact since he was a kid. So him being in these programs was just like, really interesting. So then they asked him, Clifford, what are you doing here? And he has this whole like, interview we did with him where he speaks about that experience. But they were observing in behalf of the U.S. government, shadowy aspects of the U.S. government in Vietnam, observing what was happening in the war.
Oh my goodness, I did not know that story. Is there anything look guys and everyone watching this. This is this is the cool stuff. I really enjoy that very much. Every time I come on with Neil, I learn something and he brings me in certain. Is there anything is that online? Is there any
Yeah, so I have it in an interview with him, and I know there's in a couple of books too. I know Paula Harris's book. I'll do some research. I'll make a note, and I'll try to find it and send it to you. Okay, wherever it's at.
Wow, that's so cool. I would love to hear about that. That's super fascinating, and apparently just another dot that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's keep going. We'll go for another 10 minutes. Is that okay, Tim?
Oh yeah, for sure. I love to be here,
All right.
and
So we
people are
have,
very engaged right now and
I know, right?
asking a
It's
lot of
fun.
questions. So that's super cool
Okay,
too.
we have one from BC saying, "Do you know anything on the hybrid children and waiting for in spaceships to come down to Earth? Any information on that?"
Hybrid children that are waiting. Well, we do know that there are certain. I might not be aware of what he's referring to directly, but we do know that there are certain hybrid schools. So, for example, the Greys do have a school for hybrids and humans, and we always joke and call it the Grey School for the gifted kids, which probably has a different name, but it's something that happens to 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. They're taking on these ships and being lectured on certain topics, how the world works, and so on and so on, prepared. And probably, you just watching this, there might be a chance that one of you might be in that school, might have attended that school, and might have just forgotten. So I'm not 100% aware if there might be like a collection of hybrid beings that are somewhere out there. If so, well, send them down.
So Jane is asking, where did you learn these techniques that you're going to share at your post-conference workshop?
Oh, I had to walk the walk myself. I wouldn't be here and teach what I'm teaching if I wasn't in the situation of integrating all the stuff myself. So we had these direct contact experiences, with two major species, if you want to call them species, two entities or two entity civilizations. And they were, teaching me a lot. These things went on for month and month, and you do have like this probability field around yourself where you already carry what you're going to do in your lifetime, especially if it's something that is so strong, like all shift happening now, which for example I'm doing. So that is something that brings that is very, very strongly in my informational field. Apparently my mom, for example, said that in the very moment when I was speaking my very first word, it was heureux, which happens to be happily in French. So that was kind of interesting too, that it was my first word. So apparently, species, and when you're trained in psionics, you can see these probabilities. They were teaching me some stuff. I'm bringing that forward to the world right now and teaching others, so they are prepared and can be, to have a certain advantage and certain, development from that. And then I had, different contact moments in my life that were outside of the programs, and I learned stuff there too. And I'm very, very committed to bring these techniques and this wisdom and prepare people in the right context. I wouldn't put that on YouTube and say like, hey guys, here it is, because I think people deserve to have some guidelines, some guiding towards that. You shouldn't, I'm not a big fan of people being thrown into something and then they have to figure it out themselves, like a gym. Nowadays you can just go into a gym and say like, hey, I want to do chest training, and people just give you a pass, and then you're alone in the gym and can do whatever. I'm not a big fan of that. People mostly ruin their bodies if they do these things. So I'm very, very much thinking it's a great thing if there's someone who's integrated these techniques and who's learned all this, and then bring this integration and these knowledge, these knowings to other beings. And then you go out and then you spread that to your children, you spread that to your friends, you utilize that yourself in your life. So you have like a real practical usage in uplifting your own life, in navigating reality, because that is what it's about, communicating and navigating the universe. So I'm very, very glad and happy to bring that forward to people.
It's beautiful. So Sacred Enzyme is asking about mantis beings. Curious if some of these mantis beings first show up. Did you ever connect with mantis beings? Do you know anything about them and their history?
I did not connect to any mantis beings. I was never in the insectoid program. I do know that everything I know is from side knowledge from the Grace and the Great program, because apparently they do have certain alliances with mantis species. They mostly doing the genetic work, the scientific work, and so on. They're pretty good at modulating stuff.
That's interesting. You just said you were not part of the insectoid program. So are you aware that there was another program that was operating specifically interacting with insectoids?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was even brought I was even brought into that program for one instance. So there was something. So what they call is transmission, which means anything that is received from extraterrestrial sources is called a transmission, and sometimes you receive video messages. However, they are recorded. That is not your typical video recorder that is taping ETs. Any voice mails, any signatures, anything they receive, that is called a transmission. And they received one transmission of a gigantic bug species, and it was a video that was shown to me too. So I was brought into that program for one day and one day only, where I was shown that video, and you had 3 bug beings. I can't describe them any in other words or anything, but they were just bumping on that video like this, and it just went on. There was nothing else, and the agency was looking into that and was wondering, what is the message, what do we perceive from that? And sometimes, as there are psychic or psionic information. So they brought me in just to look at that and to write a report on it, which I did. I never got any feedback, which is usually the case. You usually write something and then you never hear about it again. But that was the only instance where I was for one day brought into an insectoid program, and I did see these beings that was just bumping on that video for several minutes without anything else happening.
Wow. Have you ever connected with any higher dimensional beings? Are these beings all physical and operating in third dimension, or any of them like claim to be from higher dimensions, fifth, sixth dimension? And if they are, like, are any of them non-physical and apparitions that communicate through other types of technology?
Yeah, the second big program that I was in for so many months, Grace were first, and they have measures. Grace have measures to communicate directly on that plane because they are not too far away in the way that they perceive and live reality. They do have these little robot bodies, so they can even operate on planet Earth. And people will, again, 30 minutes. That's part of the workshop. 30 million US Americans have seen traces. They might not memorize them, but they have definitely seen them. So the other program was this so-called experimental life form, which again has a long history in Germany, because 70, 80 years ago they tried to figure out which is the species or the life form that is behind all of this. What is behind this? They theorized in the 1940s that there might be a life form that is behind the veil of which we perceive as reality. And in my time, they succeeded in that. They were able to contact what you just call a higher dimensional life form on the plane of level 6 consciousness, which is an extremely high level of consciousness. It's a life form that contains 99.9% of all beings in the universe, which is absolutely crazy as how big that is.
What level are we, Tim? What level are we?
Well, the planet. So planetary entities are capable of displaying certain amounts of consciousness. We as individuals might be from a soul level, we might be even more advanced. However, we can express ourselves on the planetary body right now up to level 4 consciousness, which is higher than the usual human being. Level 3 consciousness would be looking in the mirror and saying like, wow, that's I. I am. And level 4 consciousness would be, okay, we are more than I. We are, the quantum universe. We are the connection with all these different other realms. So that is something that we are able to express on level 4 consciousness on planet Earth right now. So in order to make contact with a life form that is at level 6 consciousness, which is, the Germans have this beautiful word for that. They call that the Nichts, which is the living nothingness. That's what they call it. So it's a realm of existence that has no representation on planet Earth right now, because it does not. It's too much information to be contained on planet Earth. It's just as if you have like a 8K super crisp YouTube video, and you want to bring that into a 1970s black and white TV. It just can't, it doesn't operate in that way. So what they did, these German scientists, they had these coils, and they were compressing some of the frequential realm inside of a container. So that means that you basically have almost like an adapter, HDMI to, what's that called, SCART, like these super old blocky thingies that they put into, very, very old television sets, right? So these things exist nowadays. You can play like a Super Nintendo on your new television right now if you want to. So that was, it's not how that works, but just take that as a metaphor. What they did, they were basically compressing some of the information so that they were available in the same space that I was in that technology too. And that helped us to make direct contact with that very, very high speed, life form that they called, well, I translated it to being 6. It was Lebensform 6, which is life form 6. I translated it into English as being 6 because I think being is, much nicer way to see it. But that was direct contact, and it was crazy because I could hear the voice. There was a physical voice of them in the room, but it had no representation locally. So usually vocal sounds are being reflected by the surfaces in the room. But in that moment, it was just that voice. And it reminded me, years after that, I read somewhere about the ancient Egypt. They were saying at some points they were hearing the voices of the sky, but there was no being. It just was the voice of God or something. That's how they called it in the text. And that was exactly how I perceived that too. It's just a voice without any representation. Very, very interesting, and actually the most beautiful experience in my life too. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so as we're closing out here, we'll get into some bigger universal questions now. And the good segue is the higher dimensional aspect of it all. So I listened to a channeling once, and this person was asking these beings, these higher dimensional beings, what do you do for fun, right? And the context of that is that they've transcended space-time. They know all realities simultaneously. Their free will might exist, but they're aware of what's going to happen, what has happened, and all infinite possibilities. And then the beings answered back, we create life and watch it grow. Okay, so basically, after they transcended all things that we do for fun, music, dance, hanging out with friends, going to a bar, their next level of excitement was seeding worlds. And then because they transcend space-time, observing that life grow from their own genetics. So
Cool.
did you ever have an opportunity, or did you ever explore, why were these beings communicating with us? What did they do on their world? What is their life and their culture like?
I was hoping for the question, were you ever, aware of anything that these beings were doing for fun? Because
That one too, yeah.
I want to answer that because I want to answer that too, because for me, it's one of the most beautiful things in the universe, how different and exotic life can be. And the Grace, for example, they they do the most complicated Sudoku puzzles in the universe, and they have so much joy doing that, and it's crazy. It's crazy, and the expression of joy that they experience is so low level compared to what a human can do. You might be, it's crazily how crazy how complex the emotional world of a human is. It's crazy how you can go one day you feel, you feel extremely happy, and someday people are just crying, and so the emotional capacities of humans are so extreme. And then you have grace, who have like a very, like only a 0 point fraction of what humans are capable of, and they enjoying doing these extremely complicated sudokus. And also they're humorous. They do have a sense of humor. People would never think they do, but they do. Animals have a sense of humor as well, which is kind of funny. You might see animals that just be surprised at anything, and then you see how they are amused by barking at someone, and seeing someone like and they are like, yay, that was funny. So the Greys have a humor. They have the I'm it might be just my personal standpoint, but they love, for example, like these very sophisticated, overlayered linguistic jokes where one word would mean something else, but it still makes sense. So very, very reduced. For example, if I would be talking about teaching and learning, that would be, for example, the same concept, because when I'm teaching something, I'm also learning. As you can see today with Neil and me, it was like a crazy teaching and learning experience. So, and if you take that 500 levels higher and build something that is super, super complex, that is like something that they could, that they enjoy laughing about a lot, which usually probably would not earn any laugh at a comedy club or so. But anyway, these are the types of humor that exist in the universe.
Beautiful. So, in your bio, in the last line, it says, your deep understanding of the mysteries of the universe comes from your extensive contacts. And maybe this is more than just a 5-minute answer, but how does the universe work? What have you learned about the mysteries of the universe?
Well, Neil, that is a longer than 5-minute answer. I've become really good at compressing wisdom into very, very
Yeah, no,
because
right?
ultimately, social media, right? They only give you 60 seconds to explain like something very profound. That is good if you want to do like a foot post, like a post about your breakfast, but it's really, really complicated if you take the whole universe into perspective. So something that the universe is based upon logics, at least this version of the universe. And again, there are other versions of the universe that might work completely different and might only be connected because they are not, which makes it very, very a lot more complicated. But the universe itself has certain logics that work. And what the first designer of this universe, or the first creator, of which we all are this very first creator, we found that there are certain dynamics in the universe, certain phenomena that we can utilize in order to transport information. We were able to create architectures from that logic, and we took these logics and we built upon them, and more we structured them, and found even ways of our consciousness that are very, very good at structuring these architectures. And ultimately we ended with this here. So that's like my 60-second take
That's in a
about the
nutshell
universe.
right there. Maybe we can do another webinar in the future called "How Does the Universe Work?" or "The Nature
That's
of the
cool.
Universe."
We
That would
should
be
do
really
like
cool.
a 13 episode series of that, I guess.
Really? Is that deep? This has got to be that deep, huh?
I mean, we can probably talk the rest of our
You
lifetime
have
about.
all that information that you can go for 13 episodes on the breakdown of the universe?
Yeah, I bet I do, because apparently, like Sid Goldberg, who's this 2-time
Yes.
Emmy Award, you know him. He challenged me to write a book, so he came by and he interviewed me, and I think we have like 400 pages now of stuff before we had to go back. So I think it's endless information, and actually, it's not that the universe is not that complicated, but it's extremely complex if you think about that. It's
That's
really,
beautifully said. That's beautifully
yeah,
said.
yeah.
There's so much to it, but then when you break it down, it starts to make sense, right? That's the
It very
simplicity of
much
it.
does. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think, I mean, come on,
it
it's
answers
like,
the questions probably.
what's that?
So it probably answers the questions because ultimately, if you think about it, otherwise we just have the questions. What are we? Who are you? What is the universe? Is it infinite? Is it finite? You
Oh,
know?
that's a good question, Neil. To be, and that is actually with, for example, being sixth. They said, like, because we asked them what is like one thing that you guys are still interested in, because you apparently like being six, being at level 6 consciousness. Just so you have like a perspective, at level 7 consciousness, we merge all our consciousness together back into one unified field of consciousness. So it's very close to
Yeah.
the completeness of completion of everything. And they were saying, like, hey, we still want to figure out, is the universe endless or is it not? Because ultimately you need to play that out, because otherwise you will never know. If the universe once comes to a point where it's like, okay, that's it, roll the
Yeah.
credits, then okay, that's endless. It's ending. But if it's going on, you just keep waiting.
Dude, everything you say just adds so much questions. We could literally talk for 10 hours, you know what I'm saying? Because
This
like,
is why I love hanging out with you, Neil, and I'm so excited, and you guys should be excited too. So come to
yeah,
Glastonbury, because then you can hang out with me and with Neil.
yes, and we could have long conversations together. So Tim, thank you, brother. I appreciate you as always. This is just so great. It's late over here in Thailand, so this is a good way to end my night. I feel accomplished after this conversation. But I appreciate you, brother. Everything you're doing. I really enjoy talking to you and going deep with you. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you too, and whatever what you do with PortalToAscension, and everyone out there. Please have a look at Glastonbury and consider joining us. I'd be very, very pleased and happy to meet you there. Again, it's my very first live workshop, so happy to see you.
Yep, it's going to be really fun. That's September, the end of September, the last weekend. So thank you everybody for tuning in. This is Neil with PortalToAscension. Love you all, and we're going to close out with the trailer for the conference once again. So see you guys next time. Take care.